So Dr. Lloyd, I'll start with you. Can you please share your thoughts and your reflections on what Leanne has just said to us in those powerful words, and then your reflection on the criminal justice system here in the Northern Territory, please.
Thank you very much. I begin by acknowledging and paying my deep respects to this land on which we meet, the traditional owners, the Gulkula clan. I'm so grateful for this opportunity to have the chance to address people of the Territory, the people that I now represent as the Director of Public Prosecutions for the Territory. My reflections on what Leanne has said can be summed up in one word: wow. I am going to direct most of what I have to say to what Leanne has said in my particular area, which is that the courts are handcuffed because of limited sentencing options, that there are few alternatives to custody, that parole is often breached, and that many times the courts impose conditions that are almost impossible to comply with. So that's where I'm going to focus my attention, because that's my area of responsibility as well. Can I say that I have to acknowledge and preface my talk by the fact that I've led a privileged life. I've walked the life of a middle-class white male who's reached a certain age and a certain position of power, and that all my life I have benefited from those advantages. I've, in my early days, didn't appreciate the particular advantages that I had, and I now am much more conscious of those benefits that have been bestowed upon me when others, perhaps much more deserving, have missed out on those benefits. Can I also say with certainty that I've made mistakes, and I've made mistakes in my career as a Director of Public Prosecutions in prosecuting Indigenous Australians. And when I've made a mistake, I have tried my best to correct that mistake when it's been pointed out to me, and I'll continue to do that. I expect that I will make mistakes. It's almost a certainty when you're making decisions in the complex area of the criminal law. I was the Director of Public Prosecutions for 10 years in New South Wales, and I've only recently moved to Darwin. My path to the Territory happened shortly after I stopped as the Director of Public Prosecutions and went back into private practice, and I came up to the Territory to prosecute a significant case, the multiple murder trials of Ben Hoffman. My partner and I travelled into the Territory, and we were struck by the beauty and the power and the boundless potential of the Territory. As we reflected on the specialness of the Territory, we knew that it was inextricably connected to the great truths of the Aboriginal culture that resonate in this land. The representation of Aboriginal Territorians in the criminal justice system is also strongly resonant, not of joy and promise, but of disadvantage and trauma. In fact, that is the case for every criminal justice jurisdiction across this country. Aboriginal people find themselves overrepresented as recipients of police arrest and court punishment all over this country. And yet, while they're overrepresented in the courts and in the prisons, they're underrepresented in roles of influence such as lawyers, judges, and senior bureaucrats. My role as the Director of Public Prosecutions for the Territory is to provide a fair and effective prosecutorial system, and improved outcomes for Aboriginal Territorians are fundamental to a fair and just Territory system. The criminal justice system of the Territory is symptomatic of a system that has its roots deeply embedded in the colonial discourse, and it's inherently unhealthy. standardised one-size-fits-all sentencing options in administering justice and applying punishments contribute to a cycle that leads to nothing but recidivism and hopelessness. Our population of First Nations people, of traditional owners of this land, 30% of the Territory's population. So what happens to the lives and in the communities of Indigenous Australians impacts on the lives of all Territorians. Integral to my ambition as the Director of Public Prosecutions for the Territory is doing better for Aboriginal Territorians and using my sphere of influence, as Leanne has urged, to do everything I can to see that happen. We are in the Territory extremely lucky to have an Indigenous Attorney-General, Chancey Paik, and his predecessor, Selena Ubo, is also Indigenous. This in itself means that the criminal justice sector is represented in the Territory Parliament by those who have personal experience of the detrimental impacts of the usual ways of working. I'm so grateful that there's not a need to convince those politicians of systemic disadvantage. That those politicians and their Indigenous colleagues in Cabinet and in Parliament recognise the potential human, social and economic benefits that are on offer if we can do things better in the Territory. Words like mine and the words that we've heard this weekend will not mean anything unless there is action. And we've heard that in relation to a number of speakers. And I just want to talk very briefly about action, firstly in New South Wales with the introduction of the Wallama court list, whose establishment was driven against the odds by the irrepressible Justice Dina Yehia and a group of elders in New South Wales. And then I want to round up my talk with some thoughts about the future of criminal justice in the Territory and about the Aboriginal Justice Agreement that's being led by Leanne. The Wallama Court in New South Wales is an adult sentencing process, and it took 7 years to come to creation, and it's a culturally sensitive sentencing process. Wallama is a word from the Darug language which means come back or return. In the context of the Wallama list, that means coming back to identity, community, culture, good health and a crime-free life. The Wallama list operates within the existing New South Wales court system but has very distinct methods and goals which distinguish it from the traditional court process. It provides a therapeutic and holistic approach to sentencing eligible Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander offenders. Wallama sentencing is about elders and respected community members, government and non-government services working together both in policy and directly in sentencing proceedings to address underlying needs and the risk factors linked to the offending behaviour. Broadly, the Wallama court list's objectives are those that Leanne has spoken about. Reduce the risk factors associated with offending, reduce the rate of breaches of court orders by making them real, reduce the overrepresentation of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people in custody, increase compliance with court orders, increase the community's participation and confidence in the criminal justice system, facilitate better understanding of the underlying issues that are leading to regular reoffending and helping to keep, by doing all of those things, the community safer. What happens in the Wallama list is that elders and other respected people from community, the community of the offender, work with the traditional systems judge in the sentencing proceedings. The critical component of it is that it is a community-led approach. The elders provide leadership by sitting with the judge in the sentence proceedings. They develop with the judge the sentencing conversation, and they develop a case plan. They provide advice regarding the background of the offender and the possible reasons for the offending behaviour. Elders have the understanding of community expectations around appropriate punishment. Elders can explain relevant kinship connections, how a particular crime has affected the community, and advise on cultural practices, protocols, and perspectives relevant to the sentence. The elders' presence at court is very practical, and it's also extremely symbolic. The importance of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander cultural authority in decision-making and respect for the judicial system cannot be overstated. And Judge Yehia, who's championed the court, has described to me the impact. When she's talking, the offender will so often be looking down and largely uninterested, and when the elders are talking, they're looking up, they're nodding, they're interacting. It's a real process for them. The elders in the Wallama list are giving honest and fearless advice to the Wallama list judge, informed by their cultural knowledge, their wisdom and their experiences. They advise the judge on cultural issues. The voices of the elders give powerful cultural underpinning to the Wallama list, and their participation is sending the clear message to the person who's being sentenced that the offences committed are neither condoned by the Indigenous community nor the community at large. Now, Leanne is leading the Aboriginal Justice Agreement, and I am delighted and heartened by the Aboriginal Justice Agreement and its potential. It was 7 years of pushing through much resistance, apathy, and a general lack of willingness to develop the Wallama Court, which I was a member of the implementation committee from day one. This previous experience, though, has been invaluable because now I'm a participant in the implementation of the Community Court Working Group here in the Territory. The aim of the Community Court project is to help Aboriginal communities establish homeland-based courts which offer criminal justice solutions which satisfy community requirements for punishment and justice. Having the backing of Chancey Paik, a proud Aboriginal man descended from Arenta and Gurindji peoples, whose lands reach across Central Australia and also to the Victoria River regions, it's an enormous advantage and means that the Community Court has an incredibly strong starting point. But to Leanne, and what Leanne has had to say, and you've seen the force of action that she is. You've seen the strength that she's bringing to the project. She reminds me very much of Justice Yehia, who, without her drive, the Wallama Court would never have taken place. So to have Leanne leading the Aboriginal Justice Agreement, her energy, courage and commitment being there to developing a well-consulted, you heard that, 120 community consultations. That's not imposing what is thought to be best on people, it's asking them what is best in their communities. It's an Aboriginal-driven community justice offering, and that's what's fundamentally been missing from our criminal justice system. The aim of community courts is to bring voices and the insights of the leaders in community to the issue of sentencing. The starting premise is that elders in the community that's impacted by the offending are the best placed to understand the response that is required. Best placed to mete out the appropriate punishment that can positively impact by being timely and appropriate. This is a place where our current system can learn much from the Aboriginal community. Once a fitting punishment has been exacted and justice is done, people need to have the opportunity to re-enter society as full and respected participants. This must be the aim of a civilised society. Of course, some people will re-offend, but we will never offer a true possibility for reintegration into the community without paying respects to the idea that once you've served your time, you are entitled to come back into society. My office is committed to the implementation of community courts in the Territory, and I believe that there are 4 key factors to success in this area. 1, like the Wallama list, the AJA is led by an irrepressible woman, a leader who understands the crucial issues because of lived experience. Our Attorney General, Chancey Paik, supports doing things differently and making a change. The AJA has bilateral support, and no legislation has been passed in New South Wales. You need legislation to endorse taking a different approach. And the elders and respected leaders that I'm meeting in the Territory have so much to add to the criminal justice system, and the whole Territory community will soon see how positive that impact can be when community have a say in how justice is administered. I'm going to leave off here. We've heard so many amazing speakers, and Leanne, thank you. I'm humbled and excited to be on the platform next year. I look forward to working closely with you as we go forward for the benefit of all people in the Territory. And again, my heartfelt thanks to the Gumach, to Yothi Indi Foundation, to Denise Bowden and all those walking on this journey until we meet again at next year's Garma Festival, and where we'll be looking ahead and looking towards the future, the theme of this year's.
Thank you, Lloyd. Community-based, absolutely. Thank you very much for sharing your thoughts. Now I'm going to go to you, Dr. Eddie, as the Associate Dean of the University.